Sunday, May 31st, 2020. First, let us hear a reading, a short reflection that sets the stage for our sermon today. It's a piece that has been making its way around the internet for some time now, shared by various people on Facebook, in email messages, and so forth. While some have attributed these words to the famous comedian George Carlin, the actual writer is unknown. In fact, one of the fact-checking websites, after a careful investigation, came right out and said that Carlin did not write this piece, even though it is done in his unique style and probably conveys the same kind of brutally honest but thoughtful critique of our world that he would have done, if he were still alive today. So, this reflection is called Paradoxes by Anonymous. The paradox of our time in history is that we have taller buildings, but shorter tempers, wider freeways, but much more narrow viewpoints. We spend more, but have less. We buy more, but enjoy less. We have bigger houses and smaller families, more conveniences, but less time. We've added years to life, but not life to our years. We've been all the way to the moon and back, but have trouble crossing the street to meet a new neighbor. We've done larger things, but not better things. We've cleaned up the air, but polluted the soul. We've conquered the atom, but not our prejudice. We write more, but learn less. We've learned to rush, but not to wait. We build more computers to hold more information, to produce more copies than ever, but we communicate less and less. These are the times of fast food and slow digestion, big men and small character, steep profits and shallow relationships. It is a time when there is so much in the showroom window, but nothing in the stockroom. Especially not critical items like protective masks, ventilators, disinfectant wipes, toilet paper, and life-saving drugs and vaccines. This is a strange time. The time when technology can send these very words we speak right now around the world in a split second, while giving you the ability to read or hear them at your convenience, or to share them just as quickly, or to just hit delete and send them unread and unseen into the nothingness of cyberspace. Such is our world today, and here ends the reading. In Michelle Obama's new book, Becoming, she writes about her experience meeting Nelson Mandela for the first time. This was during Barack Obama's first term in the year 2011, when things were becoming more challenging politically with each and every new day, especially when looking ahead to a re-election campaign. Michelle writes, Nelson Mandela had gone to jail for his principles. He'd missed seeing his kids grow up, and then he'd missed seeing many of his grandkids grow up too. All this without bitterness. All this still believing that the better nature of his country would at some point prevail. He'd worked and waited, tolerant and undiscouraged to see it happen. I flew home propelled by that spirit, she says. Life was teaching me that progress and change happen slowly, not in 2 years, 4 years, or even a lifetime. We were planting seeds of change, the fruit of which we might never see. We had to be patient. Her story of becoming is one we can all relate to, especially now in these crazy, unsettled days in which we're living through not only a global pandemic, but now also days and nights of demonstrations and violence protesting the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Who among us has not gotten tired of all the ups and downs of these past couple of months, or these past few years? Our patience is being tested every single day, wondering when it will all be over and when will we be able to get back to our normal lives. But as some visionaries have commented, maybe getting back to normal is not what we should be hoping for. Is all this death, sickness, suffering, and violence all for nothing? Are we just going to have more of the same old stuff? The kind of dysfunctional world that George Carlin or his anonymous imitator wrote about? If that's the case, we might just as well give up now. Like those street corner evangelists like to proclaim, "The end is near! Prepare to meet your doom!" Really? I don't think so. There's a lot of life still left in this amazing old earth, and don't let anyone tell you differently. Of course, after watching the demonstrations unfold on TV in Minneapolis, Louisville, Cleveland, Atlanta, New York, Boston, and elsewhere, it's pretty natural to have our doubts. At times like these, it can be comforting to remember the words of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "America must see that riots do not develop out of thin air. Certain conditions continue to exist in our society, which must be condemned as vigorously as we condemn riots. But in the final analysis, a riot is a language of the unheard. And what is it that America has failed to hear? Yes, that is the question of the day. What have we failed to hear, which has led to this moment?" One of the things that Michelle Obama touched on in her book was the subject of optimism. As she said, it is there always, embedded in the hearts of children. Kids wake up each day believing in the goodness of things, in the magic of what might be. They are uncynical, believers at their core. We owe it to them to stay strong and keep working to create a more fair and humane world. For them, we need to remain both tough and hopeful, to acknowledge that there's more growing to be done. Michelle even admitted that she herself at age 54 was still a work in progress and hoped that she always would be. And that's not a bad goal for anybody to have. A commitment to lifelong growth and learning and change. I think of the experiences of my own life. At age 42, after a career in communications, I started a new chapter in my life when I went back to school, entering seminary to prepare for ministry. Talk about change. I was turning my whole world upside down. This was the kind of life-transforming event that isn't to be taken lightly. Becoming anything new, whether it's a president's wife or becoming a pastor, takes a lot of thoughtful preparation, hard work, study, and a great deal of soul searching. Speaking of change, are you aware that change is something that's built into this big blue ball that we call home? It's all around us and always has been since the beginning of time. And it's also built into our human bodies, every one of us, whether we're young or old, tall or short, male or female. Our bodies are made up of cells, which are designed to be in constant states of change. Every day, there are individual cells dying off, regenerating, and being replaced by new cells. We aren't the same human beings, the same human bodies we were 10 or 20 years ago, or 50, 60, 70 years ago, or even 10 minutes ago. We are constantly becoming new creations physically, and sometimes, if we're lucky, our beliefs and attitudes evolve along the way too, on our continuing lifelong journey of transformation. Years ago, when I lived in Albuquerque, we had an old fig tree in our backyard. It was growing a bit too close to the house, with branches working their way up into the roof. It was becoming a real problem. So we cut it back until there was nothing left but a stump. That was my first and only do-it-yourself experience with a chainsaw, too. But that's a story for another time. Well, wouldn't you know it, the following year we began seeing new shoots coming out of that old stump. And in no time at all, probably about a year or so, we had a brand new fig tree in our yard. And one that produced some pretty tasty fruit, I might add. The moral of that story was that change can sometimes bring about some rather unexpected results, even when we start with an old, seemingly lifeless stump. When it comes to our own human existence, how do we experience change? Well, we can re-examine our lives, heal old wounds, reconnect with old friends, discover new interests and new talents, and step by step, we can remake ourselves into a new and better model. Without a lot of fanfare, we become human beings 2.0, or 3.0, or maybe even 6.0. We see the proof of that in men and women banding together to make a better world. These people find the meaning and purpose by serving a common cause, like feeding the homeless, helping people with HIV, AIDS, or nowadays the COVID virus, protesting unfair treatment by civil authorities, cleaning up toxic waste dumps, or fighting the exploitation of workers who are living paycheck to paycheck and laboring under grueling working conditions. We also know that after previous worldwide epidemics and catastrophes, there occurred some pretty amazing changes that we ordinary human beings put into practice. Like, for example, after the awful devastation of the Black Plague, new sewer systems were built in Europe, streets were paved, and new improvements in healthcare came about. The world is truly in a constant state of becoming, even following on the heels of sickness, tragedy, and civil unrest. As Michelle Obama says, becoming isn't about arriving somewhere or achieving a certain aim. I see it instead as forward motion, a means of evolving, a way to reach continuously toward a better self. The journey doesn't end. I became a mother, she says, but I still have a lot to learn from and give to my children. I became a wife, but I continue to adapt to and be humbled by what it means to truly love and make a life with another person. It's all a process, steps along a path. Becoming requires equal parts patience and rigor. Becoming is never giving up on the idea that there's more growing to be done. And boy, oh boy, do we all have a lot of growing to do. We're reminded of it every day in some people's responses to this pandemic. Folks go around without masks everywhere you see. Or how about the response to the George Floyd murder? The sad thing is, some people still don't get it. It's not just George Floyd. It's a whole lifetime of unfair treatment. Entire generations of people being deprived of their rights and kept down in conditions of abject poverty by governments that do little to help. The odd thing is, the coronavirus pandemic has shown a spotlight on this inequality in our society. While many of the folks who complain about quarantine restrictions and demand a return to normal, what they don't realize is that what was normal for them is actually an awful, oppressive, soul-destroying existence for others who aren't so well off. Author, poet, humanitarian, and social justice activist Sonia Renee Taylor puts it in perspective. As she says, we will not go back to normal. Normal never was. Our pre-corona existence was not normal. Sure, we went along with things like greed, inequity, exhaustion, depletion, disconnection, rage, hoarding, hatred, and poverty. Some say that by accepting those practices, we normalize them. But I ask you, is that the normal we want to return to? If those horrible examples of human dysfunction were normal, then we're all really living in some kind of twilight zone. We should not long to return to that kind of normal, my friends. As Sonia Taylor says, we are being given the opportunity to stitch a new garment, one that fits all of humanity and nature. Another visionary, Marianne Williamson, tells us that it's time for us to choose another way. She describes our current situation as a sort of veil, a shroud or curtain that's covering all of our eyes. And on the other side of this veil is a newborn world, one made fresh and sparkling as we more and more stop going along with the status quo. The violence that we inflict on each other in so many ways, big and small. As Williamson says, there's an undeniable awakening occurring. In the silence, in the realizations, even in the tears, we are receiving gifts of knowledge and wisdom and understanding. When this pandemic ends, whenever it ends, the sky is going to be bluer and the light is going to sparkle more, and we will emerge as a more grateful and more humble people. True, there will be some who will be taking many years to grieve their former way of life. It will be our task to comfort them. But our biggest job will be to make sure that those who died did not die in vain. That what we learned from this pandemic, or these demonstrations, is to do life differently for both our country and the world beyond. There are many people, she reminds us, who are desperately stuck in jobs they hate, stuck in companies that refuse to provide decent health care, burdened by school loans, unable to participate in the American dream. And these aren't exceptions. These are real people, human beings, who actually do care about this country the same as we do. All they want is a fair shot for themselves, their children, and their planet. But up to now, they, and all of us too, including those enjoying lives of privilege, have been turned into pawns in a cold-hearted corporate game, a cruel and manipulative process that puts the profits of companies above the needs of ordinary people like you or I. But remember, when big money is at stake like this, there will be a lot of resistance to changing things for the better. Maybe in order to create a better world, we'll need to think about a slightly different kind of government. To echo the words of our forefathers, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. All the people, not just some. So what will that look like? If we really put our hearts and souls into this, it could turn out to be the greatest transformation in the history of the world. Of course, one country alone cannot accomplish all that is needed at this point in time. Only by working together with like-minded citizens everywhere, who are all sick and tired of systems that do not work, of governments that fail to serve, can we turn things around in a truly meaningful way. Picture this, a world that's healthy and pollution-free, a home we'd feel good about passing on to our children and to generations to come. What would it be like if governments all over the world were made up of authors, musicians, engineers, architects, farmers, artists, teachers, healers, scientists, and philosophers who put human needs first rather than corporate profits? Imagine a world where you are welcomed with open arms, no matter where you travel, and whoever you are, whatever you look like, whatever your religious beliefs, no matter whether you're rich or poor. And envision a different way of providing health care, which isn't dependent on the job you have, the money in your bank account, or the connections you have with rich and powerful people. Let's imagine a world where love and compassion are treasured, and hatred is rejected and cast out. Where the new norm is recognizing that all human beings are brothers and sisters, and even more than that, a world in which we are also connected to all the creatures, big and small, who share this earth with us. Picture a world where Change and transformation is encouraged rather than feared and fought against. Where new ideas abound, and each new day is better than the one that came before, because we build upon our strengths rather than our weaknesses and divisions. And most importantly, envision a new mindset where our success is measured not by how much money we can make or how much we can outdo our neighbors, but rather how much good we can do in this world and how we can improve the lives of all around us. I know this is a radical departure from everything we've ever done before. But if we really want to build a world that works for all of us, not just a privileged few, then we owe it to ourselves to join together and give this a shot. We may never have an opportunity like this again. True, it's going to take a lot of forgiveness, positive thinking, and compassion for those who do not agree with us to make the kind of changes that most need to be made. And we need to embrace a love so great that it extends beyond the personal dimension and heals the entire world. As Marianne Williamson says, we need to shift from "it's all about me" to "it's all about us." No plague has lasted forever, she reminds us. No dictator or chapter of history has lasted forever. No matter how long COVID-19 lasts, it will end. We will walk the streets again and know joy again and be at peace again. It will happen. There is no darkness that doesn't give way to light. And finally, in the words of Michelle Obama, let's invite one another in. Maybe then we can begin to fear less, to make fewer wrong assumptions, to let go of the biases and stereotypes that divide us. Maybe we can better embrace the ways we are the same. It's not about being perfect. It's not about where you get yourself in the end. There is power in allowing yourself to be known and heard, in owning your unique story, in using your authentic voice. And there is grace in being willing to know and to hear others. This is how we become. Amen.